I want to give you an update on my journey through this work because I experienced something pretty remarkable earlier this week. And even though usually I don't like to talk about myself that much, I like to focus on the theory and the concepts. I just don't feel like it would be right or authentic for me here to release an episode about some theory or concept and just ignore what happened to me earlier this week. And there are going to be lessons here that you can draw for yourself. And I think it can be illuminating to see myself also going along on the ride of this journey and not just preaching at you from the mountaintop, which sometimes people get that sense because I'm just preaching theory at you, and it sounds as though like I've got it all mastered. And that's not at all the case. I apply all the stuff that I talk about myself, and of course I struggle to apply it too. I don't apply it effortlessly. So what happened with me earlier this week is that I became conscious of the ultimate nature of reality. And it felt like hitting rock bottom, as deep as it goes. Now, I've gotten glimpses of the ultimate nature of reality in the past. And it's interesting, because people think of the ultimate nature of reality as being this, okay, so it's just one thing. Okay, so you got it and that's it and you're done. But it's not like that. It's got many facets to it. It's got many layers to it. And it's such a gargantuan thing that you're realizing that it's difficult for the mind to understand it. And it's so gargantuan that you're not going to understand it in one go. One glimpse is not enough to understand it. So I was thinking about how to explain this, and the best metaphor I came up with is sort of like tasting honey. So imagine if I gave you a little spoonful of honey and I let you lick it just once. So just one little lick. That's what it feels like I had before. And after this week, it feels like I ate an entire jar of honey. So I've got a much better sense of what it is. And that's what I want to share with you here. So what actually happened is that, well, to set this up, is that over the last few weeks, before this happened, I was organizing. I went back through a lot of my notes. I started organizing my notes, especially about epistemology and a lot of kind of deep topics that I want to talk about in the book that I'm outlining. It's the very early phases of this book that I want to write. But I was organizing my thoughts for all this, creating outlines and just getting stuff clear in my own mind. And then I published those couple of episodes about understanding absolute infinity, part 1 and part 2, where I had to go through and actually think through how to explain everything. And so the interesting thing that happens is that as you think about how to explain these things to other people, or maybe just to yourself, or you're taking notes on this, it clarifies things in your mind. And for me, what it did is not only did it just clarify things for me conceptually, but it allows the mind then, when it does have direct consciousness experiences, mystical experiences in the future, is that it allows the mind to easily interconnect the dots and then to understand what it experiences. Because I think that a lot of people might experience absolute infinity or something like that, or no self, but then they don't know what the hell it was, and it just feels like some very foreign, alien, weird thing. And then when they come back to ordinary consciousness, it's like, well, yeah, that happened, but it almost feels like a long forgotten dream. And then they just forget about it and they go on with their life. They don't realize the significance of what they saw because they couldn't really make sense of it. So what happened with me here is that these things got set up, not intentionally, just kind of accidentally. It just happened because I was working on this. And then I took 225 milligrams of ALAD, not milligrams, micrograms. 225 micrograms of ALAD, which is an analog of LSD, a milder form of LSD. And this is a really magical substance. I've published trip reports about it in the past. So I'm not going to go into a lot of depth here about what that is. You can go look that up. But basically what it does is it takes your contemplation and your self-inquiry on overdrive, and it multiplies it by 1,000 really quickly. And this came on within 30 minutes, and it was a really deep trip. But it wasn't just like a trip where I was lying on the floor tripping. It was contemplation, really. I was sitting on my couch the whole time with my eyes open. I didn't move anywhere because I knew that I was going to use this moment here, this heightened awareness, to do my contemplating. That's usually how I trip these days. And so as I was sitting there very effortlessly, I passed through all the traditional boundaries that keep us in ordinary consciousness. So the boundary of insanity, the boundary of death, the boundary of existence and non-existence. All these boundaries I quickly broke through within 10 minutes. And then what happened was that I entered the Godhead. What is the Godhead? The Godhead is like the heart of God, you might say. It's the heart of absolute infinity. It feels like this infinite cosmic chain reaction, which has been going on forever. It's eternal, and its scope is unimaginable in size. It's beyond all measures of size. It feels like you're entering into the middle of the sun, and you're just going deeper and deeper, and it gets denser and denser and denser, and it's just this denseness of infinity. You're going inside this singularity, deeper and deeper and deeper. Maybe you might think of it as going inside a black hole, but it doesn't feel dark. It actually feels light. And so maybe you could think of it as a white hole. And so I'm going into this thing, and in there are contained all the possibilities of reality. This is like the heart of reality. This is, if you think of the sun, you think inside the sun there's the dense core where all the fusion and fission is happening. But then stuff arises from that, and then at the very surface of the sun, what you have is these sort of solar flares and these arcs, where this energy kind of arcs up, this plasma arcs up from the surface. It comes out, it can go quite a long way, and then it comes back in, it sort of loops back in, and then it re-merges with the surface of the sun again. So if you want to think of this experience right here that I'm having, or that you're having as an individual self right now, if you just become a little conscious of what's happening right now, this experience is one of those arcs shooting out from the sun. And so it feels like it's a sort of separate thing, and it's got a certain form and it's got a certain shape to it, and you don't understand how it could possibly fit in with the singularity. But then when you re-emerge, when you loop back in and then you go all the way inside, that flare, the particles in that flare, you could just kind of imagine that they circulate all through there. That's sort of what happens, that you start to now go inwards, whereas normally you're sort of oriented outwards as this flare. So I'm going inwards and I'm going deeper and deeper and deeper, and it almost feels like I'm going inside this infinite-headed hydra, where every human being and every living creature in the whole universe and beyond, that this it's like a ball, it's just like a ball of human beings and corpses and animals and all the sentient stuff, like all of it, you're just kind of like going through it and through it and through it and through it. Like I think about some of those war movies where they pile on human corpses, and there's just like piles of human corpses, and then they have like one soldier buried underneath, and he's trying to struggle his way out of all these corpses from World War II or something like that. You know, it almost feels like that, but not quite so bleak and dark, not in a negative way. It's just like it's filled with life. It's teeming with all sorts of conscious beings, you might say. And so I'm just kind of like going into it and going into it deeper and deeper. And as I'm going into it, I realize there's no end to it. There's no beginning or end. There's no center, because it's of infinite diameter. If you imagine it like a big sphere, it's a sun of infinite diameter. So you're never going to get to the center. In fact, where you are now is, in a sense, as much the center as anywhere else. But nevertheless, I'm going deeper into it, in a sort of sense. And this very interesting thing happens where it's sort of like a little detour where I realize that now a window opens up where it's time to heal myself. And so what happens, this was not premeditated. I I didn't really intend to do this. It just sort of felt right, and it spontaneously happened. About a window of 10 seconds opened up where I just got to like scan through my body up and down in a sort of sci-fi fashion, and just like healing took place. My entire body sort of healed itself from the inside out. That's what it felt like. Now, you might say, well, was that imaginary healing? Was it real healing? What does it really mean? Is this a medical thing? No, it's sort of beyond any kind of rational understanding of what this is. You really have to experience it for yourself. And this was the first time that I experienced such a thing for myself as even a possibility. I haven't even read about this really, but it certainly connects nicely with what we know about mystics, is that they have advanced mystics commonly report healing abilities. So that's what I understood this to be. But then about 10 seconds later, the window just sort of closed and I let it go. And I kept going deeper into this singularity. And what I realized then is that the substance of everything, which is the ultimate nature of reality, the substance of everything that you see and that you've ever experienced is itself. The substance is not physical. This here, it's not physical. It's not made out of matter. It's not energy, even. And it's not even consciousness or awareness. This is not awareness. Really what it is it's being. And even to call it being isn't quite right, because really it has no name. That's the key insight, is that you realize that you can't name the substance of which reality is made. It's just it. Irreducibly it. And it's all one. All of it is one. This is the key understanding. Is that you cannot define the substance of reality in terms of anything, because the thing you're defining it with is itself the substance. So when you call it matter or energy or awareness or consciousness, or you put any kind of label on it, or you think of it in any terms of kind of physical way or spiritual way, material way, all of that is not it. You're missing it. You're missing what the substance is. And the closest thing to what the actual substance of it is nothing. So the substance of everything is nothing. And all of it is non-dual. I got a really strong, palpable sense of this non-duality. And what I really realized was that reality is a strange loop. What is a strange loop? This is a concept from Douglas Hofstadter. He wrote a couple of books, Gödel, and Bach, and I Am a Strange Loop. And his whole theme is that he talks about these structures within mathematics, within life, within science, within logic, within the human mind, where hierarchies sort of tangle and loop up on themselves. That's a concept I'll cover in the future in a different episode, because it's a pretty juicy and important concept. But basically what it means is that to say that reality itself is a strange loop is that it's a vicious circularity, you see. Reality has nothing to define itself against. It has no ultimate standard or arbiter to ground it in anything. And so therefore, even ideas like existence and non-existence are circular, and they don't really exist. See? And this is why it's so difficult to wrap your mind around enlightenment, and in fact, it's impossible, because the thing you're trying to understand is itself. You're trying to use itself to understand itself, and it just can't do that. It can't grasp itself. It's like Alan Watts talks about how a knife can cut everything but itself, or an eye can see everything but itself, or a hand can grasp everything, but it can't grasp itself. It can't turn in on itself because it is itself. Well, this is happening at the highest level of what all of reality is. And the problem is when we do science, or when we do philosophy, or when we do any kind of religious cosmological thinking about, oh, what is the nature of God and all that, none of that can work because you're using it to try to grasp it, which isn't it. And so there's this vicious circularity which is inherent to all of reality. And when you see this circularity, all distinctions collapse and break down. And at that point, you go into a sort of free fall, and you fall into this Godhead where there are no distinctions at all, really. It's all one substance. Even the distinction between existence and non-existence no longer applies, because that's also seen to be groundless and viciously circular. And that is the ultimate nature of reality. What it is it's like a cat unraveling a yarn that unravels the cat. That's an image that occurred to me as I was going through this process, is that's the essence of reality. That's the essence of consciousness work, is that you are this cat, and as you are doing the work and you think that you're gonna unravel the work, really the work ends up unraveling you, and you realize that all of it has just been this one yarn the whole time. This is what non-duality really means. And I got a really clear and full hit of this non-duality. And as I opened my eyes sitting there on my couch, I was completely aware that I was nothing. And that all sentient beings, all animals, all humans, and any other creatures or aliens that exist anywhere out there, that they are all me. And I was sitting there in my room, and I was looking around, and I saw, and I clearly connected, for the first time, I clearly connected how what's happening right now in this finite room that I'm seeing is actually none other than absolute infinity itself. So this is the insight that the Buddhists and the Hindus talk about, where they talk about how form is formlessness, and formlessness is none other than form. The two are one. And even though I'm talking about it here as though I went inside some singularity somewhere, like I flew off to some other dimension, actually, no. When I opened my eyes, that all of that was present right here. And it's present here right now as I'm standing here. And that all of this is not happening to a human being. It's sort of like what a human being is a little bubble within this absolute infinite singularity. In the same way that, like, if you imagine a bubble within the sun, like imagine an air bubble or a little vacuum bubble within the sun, which kind of bubbles up to the surface and then goes poof. That's really what it's like to be a human, is to be this little bubble. And that's what you're experiencing right now as you're sort of in this bubble. And then this bubble really is not happening to anybody. It's happening within nothingness. Its nature is nothingness. And then that's what you ultimately are. And that thing there doesn't exist nor non-exist. It has no properties, no features. It's just nothingness. And what I realized also is that since I am all sentient beings, and all sentient beings are one, they're identical, that I am also literally Buddha and Christ simultaneously, and all the other mystics that have ever existed. And so I stood there in my room, I remember very vividly, and I realized, like, yeah, okay, I am the Buddha. This is exactly what the Buddha was, and currently is. So it's not like the Buddha was some guy who lived 2,000 years ago or something like that. It's like, no, the Buddha is exactly what's being conscious of what you're experiencing right now. Not in a metaphorical way, literally, because the Buddha was nothing, Christ was nothing, you're nothing, every single living creature is nothing, your dog is nothing, your cat is nothing. That is what's conscious of everything. And that thing is one. And that's what unites us all. And really, what it all is it's just one being. This infinite singularity, it's just one being. It's like an infinite head hydra. And it can be anything that it wants to be. And you're just one of the heads of this hydra. And this hydra is fully alive and conscious and infinitely creative. So life is not something that is happening within your body. Life is happening across the board everywhere. Every single square centimeter of the universe is alive. But of course, we don't really see it that way because we're very human-oriented. And we're also very mammalian-oriented. And we're biology-oriented. And we don't see the life throughout the fabric of space itself. But when you go into this singularity, you see that since everything is united in one, that all of it is alive. There aren't parts of it that are and parts of it that aren't. That's distinctions that we make in a relative fashion for scientific purposes and for just for human being purposes. I also became acutely aware that non-existence is impossible, and that there's nothing to fear about death, because death is here right now, if you want to think of it that way. You think that when you die, you go somewhere, you disappear into some void or some nothingness? No, that void is here right now. That void is what's conscious of everything right now. There is no other place to go. You can't escape the all. You can't escape infinity because infinity is everywhere. There's no way you can escape it. Anywhere you are, it already is. Anywhere you can be, it's already been. So existence is literally impossible. And that's a pretty cool thing to realize about life. It starts to change your attitude towards life and towards death and towards people and everything else. I also had the insight that reality as a whole is just this causal chain of creativity. I could see that the causal chain of creativity goes down infinitely forever to the bottom. Like some scientists will say, oh, well, our brain is doing all the work. All the neurons, they're making us creative. No, every single one of those neurons, you got to understand, is infinite. It's got an infinite causal chain that goes on forever. You are never going to get to the bottom of what makes that neuron act like that neuron. You could break it down to subatomic particles, strings, and below that, and other dimensions, and you will never get to the bottom of it. It'll keep going and going and going and going and going forever. There's an infinite causal chain to everything, to every thought that you have, to all creative insights, to enlightenment itself, to your being, to your sitting here and breathing and being alive. It's an infinite causal chain of creativity. That's the essence of this thing. It's gargantuan. It's beyond anything that can fit within the little confines of science, for example. And that's it. And I became aware of everything, in a sense. Everything has been understood. And that was a very clear point that I reached where it felt like, okay, that's it. This is it. This is everything there is to understand about life. And then this acute sense of my life is complete. This is what I've wanted to know since I was basically a kid, since I started doing philosophy when I was a teenager and in college, and then for the last 5 years or so since I've been doing consciousness work and pursuing life. This is what I wanted to know. And it wasn't even about me or who am I or what am I or my own personal enlightenment. That's not really what I wanted. What I wanted was I wanted to know what is the substance of all of reality. And here I finally got it, not just as a little glimpse, but as a full-blown understanding where everything was clear, where there were really no more questions left. And that's it. So let me talk about the after effects. So a couple of days passed and various after effects were happening. Of course, I came back to ordinary consciousness. After some number of hours, the next day, I was back into ordinary consciousness, but there were lingering after effects. Most importantly was that I retained my understanding of the truth, and I retain it to this day because it's not a experiential thing which is happening right now. It's not like I'm experiencing it. It's more of like, okay, I understand. It's sort of like you understand why 2 + 2 = 4. You don't necessarily need to run through the proof every time. You just, once you get it, you get it. Even though you might not be experiencing it right now. I also now, whenever I'm kind of going through my day, even though I'm back to ordinary consciousness, just when I'm interacting with stuff, when I'm looking at my hands, when I'm going to the bathroom, when I'm cooking, when I'm writing, whatever, I'm seeing that everything that I'm seeing around me is not physical. This substance here is not physical. It's not colors. It's not sounds. It's non-dual. It's a non-dual substance. And that's pretty cool. My meditation has gone through the roof. My ability just to sit and then my mind starts to sort of focus on the non-duality of what's in front of me is quite remarkable. Although what's interesting is that I did experience some kind of ups and downs and this sort of oscillation and even a little bit of depression after I came back. Because what I've discovered is that having these sorts of peak experiences, or even any kind of breakthroughs in your personal development, it works like an oscillation, like a spring. So the way that a spring works is that it oscillates up. That's when you have your peak, or you have your insight, or you have some breakthrough in whatever you're doing. And it doesn't necessarily have to be just enlightenment. It could be in your business or in your art. You have this breakthrough. Then as a spring would oscillate, then it has to come back down. It doesn't come back down to baseline. It comes back down lower, right? Because it oscillates. And then it sort of goes through this kind of snaking motion until it evens out. So it's just like a wave like this, but then it comes back to baseline. Although the new baseline is a little bit higher than the old baseline. So what you're doing is you're having these peak experiences and then you're gradually raising your baseline, but you can never expect that your baseline is going to become your peak. That's the mistake that people make. And so it's also natural with this model to understand that when you have your peak, you're also going to have a little bit of a crash. Could be an epic crash, or it could be a little crash. It just depends on your situation. And then it sort of reverberates like that over a couple of days, maybe even a couple of weeks, and then it smoothens out. So that's a good lesson to keep in mind because that sets your expectations for what these things are going to do to you, so you're not blindsided, caught off guard by them. So in a sense, my meditation has skyrocketed, but also in a sense, I still notice just these minor agitations and frustrations and annoyances. Like sometimes I don't even just want to be sitting. Like one of the things I'll be talking about here in a second is I became extremely creative after this. And so I have so much creativity that my mind is racing with insights that I need to write down. And so it's hard for me to just sit and just to observe reality and to meditate because I'm being so creative. And so that creates some kind of annoyance. And also just the idea that I have to sit there. Also, there's kind of like underlying layer of annoyance about it. I don't know, more so than it was in the past. I'm sure that's a phase that I can just kind of push through, but it has been bothering me a little bit. So by no means am I in some sort of ecstasy or bliss as I'm walking around. That has not happened. I do have a sense of peace, and especially I notice a sense of peace resulting from not seeking answers anymore. I don't feel like there's any answer that I particularly need to get through any kind of inquiry. And so in fact, usually when I do inquiry, usually when I sit to meditate, I actually do a form of inquiry. But now I don't have anything to inquire about. So for me now, it's more about just meditation, which is just being with the present moment. It becomes very simple. There's like no asking myself questions of who am I, what is the world, what is reality, what are sentient beings. It's like, no, just sit there and notice that everything's already infinite. It's more like that. So that's, I guess, sort of the way that inquiry might progress if you're doing it right and you're having the actual answers. I still notice very acutely my addictions and bad habits because they have not gone away. Don't expect your bad habits and addictions to be cured by these sort of existential insights. I mean, it could happen, but not necessarily. And most likely you'll need to work on those separately. So I still have plenty of work to do as far as that goes. Creativity for me has gone through the roof because one of the things that sort of happened to me in this journey of going into this Godhead is that I realized the creativity of everything, and I realized just how powerful of a force creativity is. And I sort of opened a channel, it felt like, to divine creativity, and that now is sort of flowing through me. It was before, but now I'm more aware of it, and I'm more aware of just how massive a force this is. And so over the last week, I've been very creative, working on my book, got a lot of stuff done, had a lot of amazing insights that I'll be sharing with you in the future that I've been taking notes on and conceptualizing and making sense of. So the creativity has been quite remarkable. And my passion has also been as high as ever. In fact, after all this happened, after these insights, I felt like even though my life was complete now, and there was nothing particular that I needed to do, I was just passionate about sharing these insights with the world, and I was just passionate about the creative process. I'm getting more in touch with my own creative process in ways that I sort of got out of touch with in the past, and that has been a great experience, although it is challenging to balance creativity with no mind or meditation. For me, that's been a big challenge for a while now, and it still is even now, because as I find my creativity rises, since my work is very conceptual and theoretical, I'm thinking a lot about. I'm thinking about that a lot, and a lot of interconnections are being made, and a lot of stuff has to be written down and organized. So I'm organizing ideas and concepts in my mind. But as I'm doing that, I am sort of in monkey mind mode, in a sense, and I'm not in that kind of still peace meditative zone. And then when I'm being very creative all day, and then I go to sit down and meditate for an hour, that's challenging because that kind of transition is difficult to make, because once my mind gets creative, it's just off on its own being creative, and it's hard to put a stop to it and just be silent. So I'm still struggling with how to reconcile those two. One of the things that I notice with Zen people and yogis and such is that it's a lot easier just to focus on meditation alone. Like if you're living in a monastery or in a cave and you have no creative pursuits whatsoever, you're not doing any kind of art or any kind of business, you're not working with concepts, you're not trying to organize your knowledge to share with other people, that's a lot easier. Because you can just sit there with a blank mind all fucking day. And if you're an artistic type of person, then good luck with that, is all I'm saying. Now, I'm not saying that Zen masters and such and yogis can't be creative. They can be creative, but my guess is that they compartmentalize those things well, because it's hard to do them both simultaneously. They get in each other's way. And then the last after effect that I really noticed is that I realized that I have entered into spiral dynamics stage turquoise. It just occurred to me, it just dawned on me. It's like, oh yeah, okay, this is turquoise. I'm in turquoise now. And what turquoise is, it's the recognition of non-duality, the interconnectedness of all of life, and yeah, it's like, it's beyond systems thinking. So systems thinking is still happening. Stage yellow is at this level of where you're thinking about the world in a sort of analytical fashion. Whereas stage turquoise it's more at the level of being. You're being it, you're feeling it, you're more connected to it on an energetic level. It's beyond just breaking things down into analytical systems the way that an academic or a scientist might do. And it's It's seeing the irreducibly mystical nature of all of reality. So that's stage turquoise. And I think stage turquoise is also tapping into the creativity, that creative power of reality in a more direct sense, in a much more conscious sense, knowing where that power comes from, opening those sort of channels. And so, yeah, I was quite thrilled to enter that stage. I hadn't really thought about stages in the past. Usually I would think of myself as a stage yellow kind of guy because I'm always thinking about systems and analyzing stuff from multiple perspectives. But here it's kind of like, feels like going to the next level. Now, that doesn't mean that I'm in stage turquoise fully. I still have remnants, I think, of the old stages within me that I need to work through. There's still some orange in there. There's still some green stuff to work through. I'm still very much passionate about stage yellow, but then stage turquoise is really where it's at. That's where you ultimately want to get to. And the only way you're going to get there is through direct mystical experiences and having insights about the absolute nature of existence. That's how you do it. That's why stage turquoise people are so rare, is because I think as far as you can go just using your logical conceptual mind is stage yellow. And then to go beyond yellow, you need to have these experiences for yourself. So the question arises, am I enlightened? And the answer is no. I don't want to say that I'm enlightened. I don't feel like I qualify for that classification, because I think that what's missing is that even though I have the insight and the knowledge and the understanding, I think that there's a further step that needs to happen, which is that I'm missing the abiding non-dual awareness that I know is possible. So I think that the ultimate step would be to be able to actually stand here before you and to, I guess it's almost like to be permanently high, to be permanently tripping, so that you're actually seeing the non-duality. You're not just knowing it, but you're actually, it's like right here. It's very palpable. You're almost in a sort of ecstatic state. I'm definitely not there. I think that for that to happen, I would need to do a lot more meditating and just being present with the moment. Not that I particularly need any kind of insights, but just to be present. I already feel like I'm not like the human body. I'm a little bit detached from it, but I think like not totally. So more work needs to be done there. Which leads us to the question of what's next? Well, I think what's next for me is exploring stage turquoise more, exploring creativity, figuring out how to reconcile creativity and meditation. I think what's next is a lot more meditating. Just sitting and doing nothing and just being with the present moment. I really need thousands of hours of that is what I feel like, but that's challenging because I'm working, I got business responsibilities, I'm writing a book, I have a product that I want to release. So there's like a lot of stuff that I want to accomplish. So it's all about choosing priorities, and it's hard for me to justify sitting for 10 hours a day just in pure meditation, although I'm sure that would get very pleasant very quickly if I did that. What's also next for me is organizing a lot of insights and knowledge that I have a backlog of for the world, and then sharing that. That's also what stage turquoise is all about, is it's really about connecting with your life purpose and making your life purpose sort of divine. You're divinizing your life purpose. Whereas before it was sort of just like, okay, yeah, I'm helping the world maybe, or I'm doing some good for my career. And here it's like, no, it's like I'm a force of God doing God's work with my life purpose. It's sort of like that. And by the way, if you're wondering like, oh, how do I reconcile life purpose with enlightenment work? There's nothing to reconcile. The two are two sides of the same coin. Your life purpose and your enlightenment will fit together perfectly if you get them right. And the one will fuel the other. And it doesn't matter if your life purpose is teaching people or making art or making music or running a business or whatever it is. It doesn't have to be teaching people. Your enlightenment will still dovetail with your life purpose. What else is next for me is more research and more learning. I still feel like there's a lot of stuff that I want to learn and to research for the purposes of teaching it. And also, these are more minor relative insights. So these are not absolute things that I'm researching. These are just relative insights. There's a lot of stuff within the mystical and spiritual domain and within science, within philosophy and history and other places that I want to research and kind of cobble together as I'm doing my work for the purpose of my life purpose, and also just because I'm naturally curious about them. What's more is more tripping. I found that ALAD is the most effective tool for contemplation, even more so than 5-MeO DMT. Because 5-MeO is extremely powerful. It's overkill, really, and it's too short to contemplate anything serious. You're just getting a little taste of the honey. You're not able to eat the whole jar. I mean, unless you do it constantly, I guess. But the ALAD is more gentle, and I love it because I get to sit there for 4 hours and just contemplate the hell out of everything that I want to, and it's very, very, very productive for me. So that's my go-to tool these days. Not to say that I'll never do 5-MeO, but I like the sort of gentleness of ALAD, and I can still go just as deep. What else is next for me is more personal development. There's still a ton of stuff that I want to work on in myself that is suboptimal. Like I said, bad habits, addictions, annoyances, emotional disturbances and stuff, all that stuff is still there, and you better believe that it will be there for you even after enlightenment. All that shit will still be there. You're going to have to work on it. So don't be thinking that enlightenment somehow makes personal development obsolete, or that if you're pursuing enlightenment, then you shouldn't be doing personal development. No, you need to be doing both, because they're both going to be necessary. You can't avoid doing just regular old-fashioned personal development work. So what are the lessons quickly here for you? Firstly, it's that the most important question you really want to be asking if you're an existential thinker like I am is, what is the substance of reality? That's even more important than who are you, what are you? What is the substance of everything? This stuff here, what's it all made out of? You should be wondering about that every spare minute of your day. Another lesson for you is that conceptual understanding is very helpful when you're tripping. So sometimes we talk about concepts in this work as a bad thing. It's like, oh, concepts are terrible. They keep us from the truth. Yes, and also no, because people who don't have the right conceptual foundations are not able to make sense of it, of the truth, and they're not able to make sense of their trips. And so for me, the more I understand conceptually, the better I organize my own knowledge through note-taking and thinking about it in a sort of ordinary fashion. Then when I do experience these deep things, then I can make sense of them, and then also I can talk about them. So I think one of the most important things you can do if you're having enlightenment experiences, mystical experiences, in your meditation practice, whatever, is write about it, journal about it, talk about it to somebody. Because as you're trying to articulate it to yourself or to somebody else, you're also clarifying it in your own mind what it is, and that helps it to stick. And then that helps to lay the foundation for the next experience you're going to have, and the next one, and the next one. So you're sort of gradually layering this stuff, like almost like layers of cement, right? You need to gradually layer the cement. It has to harden. Then you need to put another layer on it, another layer, and that way you can develop yourself very high. Another lesson for you is think through what the grounding for anything is. This is related to this issue of the substance of reality. So how could any substance ground any substance? Because what you need to ultimately realize is that it's all circular. It's a vicious circle. It's a strange loop. It's a cat unraveling a yarn that unravels the cat. There is no substance. There can be no grounding. That is the essence of reality, is that it's a thing which can have no ground because it is itself, and there's nothing outside of itself to ground it. That's the key insight. But you got to grasp it very deeply, with your whole being, not just with your intellect. So spend some time thinking through that on paper. Like, ask yourself the question, what grounds the difference between existence and non-existence? Because if you're like an ordinary person, you think that there's existence and there's non-existence. But why do you think that? Does the difference between existence and non-existence actually exist? Or does it not exist? Or neither? Think through that, just using your ordinary logic, to see that your logic starts to break down. And then that will set you up for having the right kind of insight in the future. Another lesson for you is make sure that you hone your desire to know the truth. This is one of your key weapons in this work, is to have a very genuine, authentic desire for the ultimate truth. You have to want to know. Not to improve your life, but for its own sake. You want to know because you want to know because you want to know. Because consciousness wants to know itself. And your consciousness. And you just want to know. Don't underestimate how powerful just that desire is. Purify it. Let it guide your life. Let it set your priorities. Let it tell you what to do. Let it tell you when to trip. Let it tell you when to meditate, when to contemplate. That can do a lot for you and cut through a lot of bullshit. Another lesson for you is that creativity and enlightenment fit together perfectly. Now, I just said that meditation and creativity can be at odds with each other. That's true. But creativity and enlightenment can fit together perfectly in the sense that once you have these deep mystical experiences, then it really frees you up to be creative in a non-detached way. And it opens up these channels for you. So if you're an artistic type of person, if you enjoy being creative, if you want to have a big impact on people with your creativity, and you want your creativity to be more effortless and not so neurotic and strained and filled with ego and all that, then enlightenment is like the perfect thing for you. Watch what happens with your creativity when you start having these experiences. It's going to be amazing. It's going to be levels of creativity. It's going to be so much creativity, you're going to be at a loss of words, and you're not going to know how to get it all down on paper. So much creativity. Infinite divine creativity. It's remarkable. You're going to feel like a vehicle of God, doing God's work with your art or with whatever. And the final lesson for you is that if you still have any doubts, there's nothing more worthwhile than this work. There's nothing more worthwhile than the truth. It is by far, hands down, the most powerful and the most significant thing that can happen to your life. It'll transform your entire life. And it will take you to levels of development that you never imagined possible, that you don't see other people around you generally having in society. It'll put you sort of into a category of your own. And while that might feel a little lonely sometimes or whatever, in the end, it's totally worth it. So if you're sitting there and you're struggling to self-inquire and to contemplate and you don't know why you're not getting the results, well, just keep in mind that you're after a very big thing here. This is a very big thing, very big prize. So you're not going to get it cheaply or easily. Might take you some years of struggle to get there. In the meantime, just keep telling yourself that it's going to be worth it. Have that sort of faith. And it doesn't have to be blind faith, but it just has to be a little, you can use a little logic here as well. I'm not just standing here bullshitting you. This stuff is life transforming. And I wish that I could communicate the full emotional power of this stuff better, but it's just not possible because this is something you have to experience for yourself. That's it. I'm out of here. Please click the like button for me. Post your comments down below. Share this with a friend and come check out Actualized.org. I have my blog, which I've been posting a lot of insights on lately. The forum, life purpose course, book list, more resources coming in the future, and stay with me for next week with more episodes.